Morton and Eovaldi to start. Okay. So what quantifies a quad dominant loading pattern? It's when the individual loads, descends from peak leg lift, enters their loading of the drive leg, right, to absorb that energy. And in doing so, you'll see that the body kind of shifts, and the back knee will shift forward and over the toe. And now I like these two video angles straight from the broadcast, right behind, so you have a pretty clear representation of these. Now, right off the bat, you're going to notice both of these individuals, Morton and Eovaldi, knowing quad dominant loading patterns and what they kind of accompany. They are far left side of the rubber. Now, we talk a lot about certain things that need to occur if you are somewhat of a quad dominant loader, and we'll dive into this in the screening. So far left is going to give them a better opportunity to get online, get linear, because they're going to be loading in such a way that's going to take their direction open side. Okay, so if you were to think about, if they were far right side guys on the rubber, that's going to give them kind of a harder opportunity, because they're not only far right side already, but they're also going to be loading to take them even more far right side. And then you'll know that they got a lot of catching up to do to get back on linear. Okay. So far left side of the rubber, both righties. I'll try to include some lefties as well. And both of these guys are extremely, extremely talented. And let's see if we can get them peak leg lift. Let's see if we can sync them up. Now, here's the quad dominant, descending from peak leg lift. Boom. So you're gonna see them both. Let's see if we can zoom in here. Such OCD with things being even. Okay, so come on. Here we go. So if you were to draw a box around the foot, you can see that the back knee is in front. Now, this in and of itself is not a breakdown, right? Because again, when we go back to the understanding of the goals of drive leg mechanics, is to absorb force, produce force into the ground, and then store up that force, store up that energy throughout the drive phase. All right. Now, although it may be a little bit tougher to do that via a quad dominant, it can also be accomplished. I talked about in a video of how certain things need to occur. I mentioned the side of the rubber is included within things you can do to set yourself up for success. Now we're going to see, just based off this screening of these two guys who both throw 95 plus, you can see that as they descend, they're going to load up the quad. You're going to see the body's direction start to go this way. So I believe that the direction is essentially dictated by the drive leg and sometimes the front side, the glove side. But in this case, I'm going to say the direction is dictated by the drive leg and the way the individual loads up the drive leg. Now you're going to see both of these guys load up in the quad. So you're going to see that the direction that they both take is going somewhat, open for these righties, third base side, but they still do a really good job of absorbing force. Okay. So I know this isn't the best angle to see that the way they stabilize this force, but you can see that as they continuously sink, their drive leg has not collapsed and just fallen due to a force is greater than capacity. You can see that they have the ability to stabilize this incoming energy by way of the posture of that drive leg knee staying pretty sturdy. Okay. So now once they fully descend from peak leg lift, their responsibility is to somewhat initiate their rotation a little bit earlier. But since they have set up on the far left side of the rubber, I believe it's going to look a little bit different per where you set up, because obviously if you're a far right side, you'll have to initiate your rotation way earlier. Far left side, you give yourself a better opportunity. Now, this is where it'll get a little bit interesting. I don't want to overcomplicate it, but what Eovaldi can do is he can evert his ankle, and what you're going to see Morton do is he's actually going to just roll and by way of initiating his rotation early. So check these out. See how Eovaldi is going to evert, meaning his heel is going to kind of stay connected. He has really good hip internal external rotation and adduction, whereas Morton, he's going to disconnect his heel early and initiate that rotation, whereas they're both initiating the rotation at the same kind of point because they both have to, being quad dominant loaders. But Eovaldi's able to evert, whereas Morton's going to kind of squish the bug, so to speak. I don't know if one is necessarily, I would say ankle eversion is more of a superior type of loading because you can snap that pelvis into rotation. But when it comes to, the grand scheme of things, is it a huge difference? I don't really think so. But it could make a difference. So you can see it really right there on how this kind of occurs. Okay. So eversion and just kind of the rolling. Now you're going to notice what both of these guys do extremely well. Let's see if we can sync these up even better. So that's right about there. Is they both have an unreal ability to segment. And I mentioned this within the breakdown of quad dominance and kind of some common things that are occurring with a lot of guys that load up the quad, and you'll see breakdowns. Is what they have to do is they have to initiate the hips early, right? You have to initiate the rotation of the hips early because of the direction. So what you'll see sometimes occur is that by way of initiating rotation of the hips early, that the trunk will sometimes initiate with the hips, and they don't have the ability to segment up until the anchor point. Now you're going to see with Morton and Eovaldi, they both do this extremely well by segmenting hip rotation and trunk rotation. Okay, so you can see both of these individuals have their hips into rotation, and they both have their trunk still neutral. Okay, let's not even dive into their ability to increase their scap load and all of that, but just notice that the way that they got into this position, okay, this is a huge piece to this puzzle. Now, both of these guys, like I said, they're 95 plus, so they obviously got to do something right. They still maintain their ability to get a ton of separation from the shoulders and the hips, basically the upper body and the lower body. This creates that rotational energy, and they have the ability to launch from stretch, meaning they anchor down and their trunk is still neutral. So obviously the mechanics of this will be more explained in the ebook, but I talk a lot about launching from stretch, basically the ability to maintain a neutral trunk at the posture or at the point of which they anchor down, which, as I mentioned earlier, becomes a little bit more difficult when you are a quad dominant loader. So you can see both of these guys initiate rotation early, boom, have an unreal ability to segment the rotations of the lower and the upper, anchor down, and then launch from stretch, pulls the arm through via the trunk. Okay, so what did they not do? All right, what they did not do by way of loading up the quad was they did not just collapse the drive leg. The drive leg didn't just collapse and fall and leak a lot of potential energy to be had. They stabilized and they stored, and then they released it. You can see the timing in which the kind of, if we just looked at the knee caving in, I just basically see that that's the time in which the hips go into their rotation, pelvis rotates. Now, that's going to be in relation to arm swing, hand raise, arm coming up. Okay, so what they did not do was they did not collapse the drive leg early, and they didn't throw off the kinematic sequence of producing energy into the ground and then getting that energy that they produced into the ground back up through the chain and out through the fingertips at ball release due to the potential of a drive leg being collapsed. They both load in the quad, but they still have the capacity within the quad to stabilize, store, and then release, or not release, but transfer that on time with their hand.